Hello everyone, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share a card that I've made for one of my oldest friends. She's an old high school friend and we used to have slumber parties, and I know she loves coffee. I've spent a lot of my life moving all around, usually for work or sometimes for school. So I don't have a lot of old friends, but she is one of my oldest and dearest friends from my high school years. And I think probably because she also moved around so much, we've been able to kind of lead parallel lives and keep in touch. So she's got a birthday coming up really soon, and I wanted to make her a special card that would let her know that I was thinking about her. I know she absolutely adores coffee, and I wanted to kind of take her back to when we were young and used to have slumber parties. So I thought this really cute Snuddle Anya from the Greeting Farm would be perfect for this. And I'm going to attach a hair coloring process video. I used Copic markers for this, and I thought that might be just a nice little process video to share with you guys as well. To make this card, I started with a craft card base, and then I decided to create this little panel just with some white cardstock and this Tim Holtz doily stencil. And I just used a couple of Tim Holtz Distress inks, some picked raspberry, and some worn lipstick, and created a kind of ombre effect in the background. And that's supposed to be like confetti, because as tame as we really were when we were in high school, we thought we were wild. So I thought that would kind of be reminiscent of our wild slumber party nights. The sentiment here is from this MFT stamp set, which I love. It's got a whole bunch of coffee themed stamps, and I thought this one would be perfect. It says, "Being your friend has its perks." And then for the inside, I use this one, "Sending you latte birthday wishes." And how I did this was I stamped it out with the Tim Holtz Distress ink. And I've mentioned this before, it's not the best to use with sentiments, but I wanted it to coordinate with the color scheme that I used to color up this Anya and for the background. So I stamped it out in the picked raspberry, and then I used clear embossing powder. I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but there's a great shine and a little raised, impression from the clear heat embossing. In order to match that, I created this little strip on the other side, just using a scrap and using the same matching Tim Holtz Distressed marker to color that strip up. And then again, I embossed that, so there's a good shimmer there too. For finishing off the card, I popped her up on double-sided foam adhesives. I did no line coloring on her, but tried to keep her in a very tight, cohesive kind of color palette. So I used the same kind of picked raspberry or RV colors, some black because my friend loves black. And then to match her hair, I colored up her little pajama shorts in the same kind of browns that I used on her hair. You'll also notice that I put some pink highlights in her hair. All of the Copic colors that I used will be listed in my blog post. For the little bunny slippers, I used the dot coloring technique just to make it look more fuzzy. For the inside, I kept it pretty simple. I used that sentiment, like I said, and Tim Holtz Distress ink in Vintage Photo. And again, to get that solid, crisp stamping, I had to use a mini MISTI so that I could stamp repeatedly. I think I ended up stamping this one out like 3 or 4 times, the same with this sentiment, just so I can get a crisp impression. And I'll attach the coloring video if you're interested right here. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day. Thanks so much for watching. So I wanted to do some no line coloring, and so I stamped out the image with Memento Desert Sand ink. Some people also use the traditional Memento Tuxedo Black and just do a second or third generation stamping for a lighter image. I then went in and used a really thin Copic multiliner pen, the 0.03, and drew in the facial features, and I also added some lower eyelashes just to give her a little more of a feminine look. Now I'm going to start with the hair color, and I'm going to start with the medium tone. This is the E53. And I'm going to use that just to try and mark in where the shadows are going to be. And I'm trying to pick out the areas of her hair that are going to be darker. And I'm not using the darkest shadow though, because just in case I don't mark it incorrectly, I know I have another color to go to. So this area of hair here is in the front. I'm going to put in a little shadow here. Follow that there. For this piece, I think this area of the hair is in the front, so I'm going to color a little behind there. I'm going to do the same on this side of that line. Then underneath her face, her chin area, that's obviously going to be darker, so I'm just marking in kind of where I think the darker shadows would be. Certainly behind her ear, that's all going to be darker. Now also I'm going to turn the image around facing you guys, but I'm going to make sure I mark in the darker shadows at her part. So her part in her hair will be right there. And I'm just going to mark that in. And I'm making sure I'm leaving some white spaces in between, because that's going to be the spaces in between actually later on as you build up more of the layers is going to be where you're going to get the look of actual hair rather than a big solid mass. And now I'm going to use an unusual color. I'm going to try V06, and that will be also where the shadows are. And you're thinking, oh, that's kind of crazy. But a lot of shadows have this kind of purpley shadow to it. So I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I thought I would give it a try. I see Sandy Allnock using darker purples as shadows, and while it's scary initially, I think when it's all blended out, it will add a nice richness to the coloring. And by the way, I'm not so concerned about staying in the lines because I'm going to be fussy cutting the whole thing out. Also going to be marking in some shadows around where her barrette is, because that will have pinched her hair right there. Now I'm going to go in with the darkest color. I'm going to pick an E29. And see, already the purple is kind of blending in nicely with this darker brown. The key really for coloring hair is to make sure that your flicking motions are following the curves of her head or where her hair flips out. Those little curved lines together en masse will create the look of strands of hair. I'm going to go back in. Actually, I think I'm going to make sure I get in some highlights. So I'm using an E53 because that middle of the hair, this is like the top of the hair that is going to get the closest to the light, as well as here. So kind of where the bump is, if you can think of it, the head as being round, that's where the lightest areas are going to be. Maybe on the outside of this swoop of her hair, but certainly here. Maybe a little bit on the swoop right there. Now I can go back in with the medium tone that I started with. And using those mid-tone colors again is the best way to bridge the gap from the highlight colors to those darkest shadow colors. And it really gives a realistic look altogether. I'm going to go in again with the next medium tone. And to keep the hair strands looking as realistic as possible, it's important to try and have a light touch with these little flicking motions. The lighter they are, the wispier the hair looks, the more realistic the image is going to be at the end. Now I'm going to reestablish the darkest shadows. And if you've watched my hair coloring videos before, you know that I always go back in at the very end and reestablish those darkest shadows, because as you add lighter and mid-tone colors after establishing where the darkest shadows are, the lighter colors bleach out some of the pigment from the darkest. So at the very end, I always do this step of adding the darkest shadows back in again. And I think that really gives the image coloring the most 3D realistic look. And I think that hair came out pretty fun. I hope you enjoyed this coloring process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It really encourages me. Thanks for watching.